Tonight, President Biden's message to Vladimir Putin, his dramatic speech from Poland, vowing to protect NATO allies and punish Russia economically, and what he had lived about Putin.
This man cannot remain in power.
That the White House had to walk back. The president also meeting with refugees and some Ukrainian leaders. The Russian missile strikes just miles from the Polish border. This as Russia announces a major strategy shift to focus on the eastern part of Ukraine and again raises the prospects of nuclear war. American veterans who've come to Ukraine to fight, what they're telling us about the huge risk they're taking if captured by Russia.
Worst case, they're probably going to execute us on sight.
Another booster shot? A new report says the White House will provide all Americans over the age of 50 a second booster shot. What you need to know. The rock star who suddenly died before a big show. The investigation now into the cause of death. Cash is king. All cash offers dominating the real estate market. How regular people are now competing.
This is NBC Nightly News with Jose Diaz-Balart.
Good afternoon. We talk a lot about split-screen moments in television news when two major events are happening at the same time. And that's what happened today. President Biden delivering a forceful address from Poland, vowing to punish Vladimir Putin for his war. While just a few hundred miles away, right across the border in Ukraine, Russian missiles blew up a fuel depot, hitting a part of the country that has been largely spared from this war. Some of those missiles hitting just moments before the president's speech. The president, for his part, committed to standing with Ukraine, but only committed U.S. forces to defending NATO countries. He framed the fight as part of a larger war to preserve democracy, but the White House had to clarify some of his strongest remarks. Kelly O'Donnell is traveling with the president tonight.
The President of the United States, Joe Biden.
In a direct and dramatic finish to his visit to Europe, President Biden called for an end to Vladimir Putin's grip on Russia.
For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
That sounded like a provocative call for regime change in Russia. But that is not the U.S. position. So White House officials put out a statement that the president actually meant Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors. Further clarifying, President Biden was not discussing regime change. But there was no cleanup on this warning to Russia that it dare not expand its war beyond Ukraine.
Don't even think about moving on one single inch of NATO territory.
From threat to olive branch aimed at the citizens of Russia.
You, the Russian people, are not our enemy.
But the heart of his message was for Ukrainians.
We stand with you. Period.
Earlier in the day, the president made his first direct connection with refugees, Ukrainian children, and mothers.
We will help you.
Wrapped in security as he moved around a Warsaw stadium turned refugee center. Mr. Biden shared what he heard from those who left family behind to fight.
Each one of those children said something like, say a prayer for my dad, or my grandfather, or my brother.
And Mr. Biden told reporters this further shaped his view of Vladimir Putin.
He's a butcher.
Ukraine's top defense and diplomatic officials traveled to Poland to meet with President Biden. New tonight, the State Department says it plans an additional $100 million in aid. From policy talks to pageantry, Poland's president honored Mr. Biden with a military review and the American anthem. And while some of the president's words here created headlines, his overall meaning resonated.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia.
And Kelly joins me now from Warsaw. Kelly, there was a lot on the line during this trip. So what comes next?
Well, Jose, first the president flies back to the United States overnight, where he says his focus will be on maintaining unity among NATO leaders on all aspects of the war response. And that unity is considered an asset because the leaders he met with this week don't know what Putin will do next. Jose?
Kelly O'Donnell in Warsaw, thank you. Let's bring in NBC News chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell, also in Poland. Andrea, the White House had to clarify that the president did not mean to call for regime change. How is Russia reacting?
Jose, the Kremlin reacted angrily to that, as it also did earlier today when the president called Putin a butcher. But clearly, President Biden was reacting to the horrors of this war, no longer thinks of Putin as the man he thought might improve relations when they met last June in Geneva.
And Andrea, after 3 days of meetings with foreign leaders, any concrete results?
Yes, Jose, the president pledged $1 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine and its neighbors, imposed new U.S. sanctions on Russian parliament members and their defense industry, and he promised to deliver natural gas to Europe to help replace what they'll lose from Russia. And while Ukraine still wants more weapons from the U.S., tonight's speech also powerfully reinforced that America's commitment to defend Poland and the rest of NATO is sacred. Jose?
Andrea Mitchell in Warsaw, thank you. Russia may be opening a new front in the war with fresh attacks tonight in western Ukraine near the Polish border, striking within minutes of President Biden's address in Poland. Gabe Gutierrez was at the scene of the strikes near the city of Lviv.
The inferno burning into the night. At least 2 missiles striking miles from the Lviv city center, shattering the relative calm of western Ukraine, sending people scrambling for bomb shelters.
It appears to be a targeted strike. Behind me is a fuel depot. You can still see the flames and the black smoke billowing into the air. It is an ominous sight here in western Ukraine, so close to the Polish border.
Local officials say at least 5 people were injured. This man lives nearby.
Pretty surprised because there's no any military objects there. No.
As we walk to another location, another smaller explosion.
Just over that hill. Right now we heard at least one other boom. Hard to tell exactly what it was.
The attacks came more than a week after a missile strike hit a plane repair facility near Lviv's airport. The city, considered a safe haven for thousands of refugees daily, had been largely spared from the violence. But this may have been a message. The strikes coming just as President Biden was preparing to speak in neighboring Poland. The world had thought Russia was shifting strategies because overnight a top Russian general said his military was refocusing its efforts on the eastern region of Donbass. A comment widely interpreted as an acknowledgement that attempts to capture the capital, Kyiv, had been unsuccessful. Instead today, Russia upped the ante, its defense minister saying nuclear readiness was a priority, prompting Ukraine's President Zelensky to warn Russia was bragging about destroying the planet. Meanwhile, the fighting still rages. Today, gunfire and smoke erupted near a pro-Ukrainian rally in Slavutich near the Chernobyl nuclear power plant after Russian forces entered the city. Also in the north, Chernihiv is all but cut off. Journalists from Sky News tried to enter the region, but shelling bombarded them, forcing them to duck for cover.
And Gabe joins us now live from Lviv. Gabe, do we know what that second missile strike location today turned out to be?
Jose, Ukrainian authorities say it was a military factory. No one was killed, but that fuel depot that was hit earlier was dangerously close to a residential area. Jose?
Gabe Gutierrez in Lviv, thank you. We've reported before on Americans signing up to fight in Ukraine. Now, some of them have made it into the country. They're doing it on their own with no U.S. government help or approval, and the stakes could not be higher. Cal Perry talked to U.S. veterans heading to the front lines.
As millions flee the war in Ukraine, there are Americans coming in to fight.
The stakes are very heavy.
John served in the military for 10 years. For his own security, he asked that we keep his identity a secret.
So why? Why is it so important that you came here?
We have to defend democracy. This is a fledgling democracy. It's tragic.
John says he had a lucrative financial job back in the United States, but after watching coverage of the Russian invasion 2 weeks ago, he quit.
I kind of made my mind up there that, hey, if these people want help, I can come over and lend my skills.
He and some 20,000 others from across the world responding to President Zelensky's call for foreign volunteers to help fight the war. David Breimer from Illinois also answered the call.
These are my wounded. Lay down.
Breimer was a U.S. Army combat medic for 4 years.
The fact that this is going on is in a terrible situation, but
we're here. And as long as they're here and these citizens are going to go through this, I'll be proud to stand next to them.
The U.S. government is strongly discouraging Americans from coming to Ukraine to fight.
We still do not believe that Ukraine is a safe place for Americans to go. We urge them not to go.
John says he's formed a fighting unit with other foreigners, including American and British veterans. He says he's in touch with representatives from the Ukrainian government about where they're needed the most. He fully expects to see combat.
You just have to get it in your mind that you may not come back and have to be okay with that. If you're not okay with that, please don't come over. This is not a game. This is not a video game.
It's a very different situation for you if you're captured by Russian soldiers, right?
Best case scenario for us, if we get captured, we're going to end up in a Russian prison probably for the rest of our lives. Worst case, they're probably going to execute us on sight.
Cal Perry, NBC News, Lviv.
Here at home, the White House is reportedly just days away from allowing all Americans over 50 to get a second COVID vaccine booster shot. But how necessary are they? Katie Beck has more.
As soon as next week, older Americans could have the chance to get a second booster shot to protect against COVID-19. The FDA is not expected to recommend the shot, but will likely authorize it for those over 50 years old, according to the New York Times. The White House acting with hopes of keeping hospitalizations and death rates low.
Does it confuse people when it's not specific, if it's sort of left up to you?
It does confuse people. We often like to have things pretty clear. It is safer to think about having this fourth shot sooner rather than later.
Data from a recent Israeli study supports that idea and shows second boosters can be effective at lowering the risk of death. The study, done among older adults, found mortality due to COVID-19 during the Omicron surge was significantly lower among those who'd received an additional booster dose. In the majority of states across the country, encouraging signs on the COVID front. Numbers going down, but a new and contagious variant has arrived. CDC data shows 1/3 of COVID cases in the U.S. are now the Omicron subvariant BA2, with Nevada, Colorado, D.C., and New York all seeing cases rise.
Is the term booster kind of getting outdated?
So the fourth shot is basically like a seasonal recommendation. And in fact, I do think all Americans will need to get used to the idea.
Medical experts say those eligible for a fourth shot should consider their personal risk factors. For many Americans, a new and important choice. Coming soon. Katie Beck, NBC News.
We're back in a moment with the new way you can compete in the red-hot real estate market. A sudden death overnight of a member of one of the country's most enduring rock bands is leaving fans in shock and mourning. Taylor Hawkins, the drummer for the Foo Fighters, died in Bogota during the group's current South American tour, the band calling Hawkins' death a tragic and untimely loss. Colombian officials say preliminary tests show the 50-year-old had 10 substances in his system, including opioids. We're coming up on the busiest months to buy a house, and the market's never been hotter. But with more people making all-cash offers, it can be nearly impossible for those who finance. But now, a new type of company is helping those buyers compete, even if they don't have the cash. Sam Brock explains.
Our country is plagued by a basic math problem. Lots of people are lining up to buy houses, but there just isn't enough supply.
Does it feel like a nearly impossible task to do this without some help?
I would say yes, because I've tried 9 times.
You were 0 for 9.
0 for 9.
9 offers for homes, 9 rejections. In a hot housing market like Atlanta's, health consultant Kyle Donald got a hot tip from his realtor Giselle.
We came in and
try a new company she works with, Homeward. It's one of a growing group of real estate firms that provide buyers with all cash offers, strengthening their hand in competitive bidding wars. The company buys the house, and then Kyle would buy it right back from them through either a mortgage with Homeward or an outside lender.
What kind of advantage does that afford to the people coming in with all cash?
It provides a really good advantage. As we know, in the real estate industry, cash is king.
Especially as big investment firms are buying up inventory with all cash offers. Just look at the latest trends on who's winning the housing tug of war. In the third quarter of 2020, just more than 1 in 5 homes were all cash sales. But a year later, it's more like 1 in 3. And in some cities, it's been even more dramatic, like in Columbus, Ohio, the Phoenix metro area. And at the top of that list, Atlanta's metro, with nearly 70% of homes being sold for cash.
Is there a learning process, though, or are some people kind of spooked by the fact that it's just such a new concept?
Yeah, it's definitely some people who are hesitant about it because they're like, what's the catch?
Homeward CEO Tim Heil says his business model involves calculated risk with cash as the lure for customers. The company's strategy is to consolidate the various aspects of home buying into one-stop shop.
We know when you come in and you say, hey, I can close in 5 days. There's no contingencies with my offer. It's all cash. And when you sign this contract, you can be 100% guaranteed that it's going to go to the closing table. We know that your negotiating power goes up in those situations.
Of course, the service isn't free. Homeward charges a 1% premium to take on that added risk. For Kyle, that meant $2,600. But after a year of rejected bids, the next one he made was accepted.
I would absolutely say that it was worth it. I mean, because I'm standing here now or sitting here now with you, and I'm absolutely happy.
There's no place like home, especially when it's yours. Sam Brock, NBC News, Atlanta.
When we return, the Peace Corps is back. Why it means so much for these volunteers to get the chance to serve. There's good news tonight about the call to service. For more than 60 years, Peace Corps volunteers have dedicated themselves to helping others. 2 years ago, COVID shut the program down, but this week it restarted. The service once again fulfilling not just vital needs, but the dreams of those who serve.
I feel like it was always a lifelong dream of mine.
I can do something that really matters.
I hope I can bring a little bit of peace back to the world.
2 years ago, these Peace Corps volunteers were living out their dreams. Adam Burgess had just arrived in Zambia.
You're thrust into this situation with, at that time, 80 strangers, and I, overnight, had a new family. I achieved more change and growth internally in those 8 days that I was there than I ever have in my entire life.
Joe Hutzelak, a former military veteran, was sent to Senegal.
I was going to actually be a health volunteer, even though maybe I couldn't understand everything that was being said. Sometimes you don't need to.
And Eileen Mark was supposed to go to Paraguay. She even sold her business.
I love to volunteer. I love the feeling of helping.
But then COVID hit. The Peace Corps evacuated more than 7,000 volunteers in 8 days.
I biked to school one day and everyone was crying and we had to go home.
I was sort of angry at some point and just kind of like, you know, I worked hard for this.
But now the Peace Corps is back, and the dreams of these three will finally be fulfilled.
We are headed for flight number 2, Miami to the DR. We will be arriving in a few hours.
For the next 27 months, volunteers will be working side by side local partners in developing countries. Their mission, world peace and friendship.
At the end of World War II was started with President Kennedy, and to, you know, remind the world that, you know, peace is good.
How many of you who are going to be doctors are willing to spend your days in Ghana?
I'm hoping to make a difference that's impactful and that will resonate in my community for many, many years to come.
I'm getting emotional right now, but it feels like, I'm sorry. I've had to wait a long time for this to happen. I've had to go through a lot of stuff, but we're going back.
That's NBC Nightly News for this Saturday. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.